Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. Let's law better. Together we explore topics of interest to legal operations. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Want to get the most from this conversation? Ask questions, comment, like, follow, say hello. In short, engage. And don't forget to have a blast. Shaking up the legal world takes a lot of elbow grease. So let's make sure we've got each other's backs along the way. Let's begin. Here's your host, Olga Mack.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. This is our first episode dedicated to legal operations. I used to combine it with legal leadership, but I think it deserves its own season. And I am really excited to kick it off with somebody really special. So without further ado, Brent, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Olga. I'm really happy to be here. I am Brent Dyer. I am the Director of Legal Operations, Employment Law, and Litigation at Trend Micro. I've been doing that for a little over a year now. Before that, I was just an employment lawyer and non-IP litigation manager at Trend. And before that, I was a law firm litigator, and I did that for 15 years.
There is no such a thing as a just employment lawyer. The most interesting people in the legal parties are employment lawyers. Every
we have the
time
best stories for sure. That's absolutely true.
right? I mean, if you want to have an entertaining night at a legal party, find yourself an employment lawyer. That's my strategy. That's what I do when I come in. I know every employment lawyer because what I know is that they know every human story and extent of human imagination, and I would be entertained for the night. So I love that you have that background. And how did you decide to be in legal operations and in house? What happened? What was the journey?
Well, I started doing legal operations for two reasons. One is that I wanted a raise. And so maybe not the smartest thing to do to take on this whole additional thing to get a raise. But I wouldn't have done it just for the money. And really, the thing that drove me to do it was during the pandemic, I had to spend a lot of time alone in my office thinking about what happens in my department, how my department runs. And I kind of came to a realization that, all the things that I complain about and that I'm not happy about, the only person who's going to fix those is me. And so I need to volunteer to be the person to fix the things that I don't like about the way our department runs.
So, what it means to give good service, especially when you're a law firm, especially when you're a big law firm, has been the subject of many debates and memos.
Maybe a few.
So, maybe let's frame this conversation. Let's talk about the memo that came out last year. You want to summarize it for us?
Yeah, well, so the Paul Hastings memo came out last year. It was about this time last year, actually, I think, and it was a memo to of a senior partner to the younger associates, sort of about what's expected of them. And the thing that everybody talked about when it came out was the sort of aspect of, you have to be on 24/7 and you should always be on call and all these things about, you need to do whatever the client wants. That was interesting to me just because it confirmed that, oh yes, my experience with big law is still the experience in big law. But the thing that I thought was really interesting that nobody really seems to want to talk about is there was this whole idea that like big law is a luxury item, like a fine restaurant or a high-end hotel. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that really is an accurate description, or at least of my experience with big law representation. I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, so let's talk about it. I mean, certainly, whoever wrote that memo is a colorful character. I mean, this person could have been a poet, but instead chose to be a lawyer and wrote a very colorful memo that conveys a point. And it's interesting that you're zeroing in on the sort of references that suggest luxury, and a lot of folks zero in on different things, including things like expectations of being on 24/7. That seems to be something that folks react to a lot. But you instead, or in addition to, focus on that luxury element. And certainly when you look at prices, they're high. They would signal a luxury good. That's a one way you signal luxury good is through pricing. You take a different point of view. I'm curious how you arrived there, and what does it mean to you?
Well, sure. I mean, it is luxury pricing, and that is true. And that's one of the things that I found interesting about the memo was that one, yes, there was a lot of, you know, you must do these things that, and some of these things, frankly, I think are abusive, not things that anyone should expect from anyone as an employee. But the luxury component was sort of that was the tack the person was taking was that we're offering luxury services, and that's why you should be so dedicated to always being available and doing whatever the client wants. And listening and frankly putting up with partner behavior that you shouldn't put up with. And and my thought was, well, okay, well, just because something's expensive doesn't make it a luxury item. It just makes it expensive. So I thought about what I get from law firms, what the law firms that I use, the big law firms I use, the kind of service they provide, and not just big law firms, all the law firms, but they tend to think that they're offering some amazing services. And from my experience as a law firm, I kind of get where that's coming from because when you're inside a law firm, it can feel that way. It can feel like, oh, yes, look at our fancy offices and look at the expensive cars that we drive and the expensive clothes that we wear. And we are providing a luxury service. But when I became a client, I started to realize, you know what, this really isn't a luxury service. I've been to fine restaurants. I know what it's like to go to a fine restaurant. I think I'm getting, in some ways, the opposite of that experience as a client. And it shouldn't justify the high prices that I'm paying, and it certainly shouldn't justify poor treatment of the people who are working for me.
So let's talk about it. I like this point because traditionally we do think of luxury being highly correlated with pricing. I do think that even outside of law, we are rethinking what luxury means. We're thinking about things like quality, impact, things that are may or may not be included in that pricing. And I think in every part of our life, for the last couple of decades, we are rethinking what luxury means. Does it necessarily have to be a logo, or it means something else, right? And I think that's what you're alluding to. And it really, I think, part of it comes down to this amorphous idea of client service, or does it come out something else?
Well, no, I think it is client service, and one of the things I think is interesting. So, and I've thought a lot about this restaurant analogy over the last few months, and one of the things that's interesting is I like great restaurants. I love to go to nice restaurants. I don't do it a lot, but I like to go to nice restaurants with my wife and have that experience. And then I think about, okay, how does that fit in with the law firms that I'm going to? And it's the law firms aren't providing a luxury experience in many ways. For example, if you go to a nice restaurant, you walk in and you're greeted almost immediately by someone who greets you and asks who you are and gets ready to get you to your table. And then you get to your table and you're almost immediately greeted by someone who's going to bring your water and talk to you about the restaurant and tell you that the waiter's going to be on their way, and then the waiter will show up. That is sort of the essence of a luxury experience. But understand that none of those people are involved in making the actual product. They don't make the food. Those are all front of the house people. If you went to a restaurant and there were no front of the house people, if you had to wait 15 minutes for somebody to even greet you and take you to your table, and then it was another 15 minutes before somebody showed up with your water, and another 5 minutes before the waiter showed up, you wouldn't think this was a luxury experience. You would go, why am I having this experience? But in many ways, that's what law firms are doing more and more, is they're saying all those people who don't provide legal services, the people we can't bill for, let's get rid of those people, or let's minimize those people. And instead, let's focus on the people who really make the product. Let's get lots of those. And that is, as a client, creating a terrible experience for us. We don't know who to get a hold of if there are problems. We get bills that are messy and not effective and don't adequately describe the work being done. All these things that used to be part of the luxury law firm experience when I started, they've now been taken away or they're being minimized so that they can focus on billing. And that if you went to a restaurant and you got terrible service, and yeah, the food was good, but the experience was terrible, and then you get a huge bill, you'd be saying, why am I paying this giant bill? And that really is the sort of feeling I have right now about a lot of law firms, especially big law, is I'm paying a lot of money and getting less for it.
Okay, okay, very interesting. So, what would you keep to to? Well, maybe let me ask you this: would you trade the prices for this more streamlined services that is not luxury and more of a necessity? Or would you keep it luxury? And if so, I mean, those are the choices, really.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And here's the thing: my first thought is, as a client, do I really need luxury services? I mean, especially if we're talking about litigation, do I need to spend a lot of money to have lawyers who show up in court wearing the fanciest suits? Does that make my experience as a client better? No. Does it make more likely that I'm going to win? No, it doesn't. Do I need someone who's going to write a memo that's going to, explore every possible aspect of the legal question, but really ultimately it's not going to help me better understand what my options are or give me better advice. It's just going to be a memo so that the law firm can go, oh yes, we're very careful about what we do and conscientious about our work. Okay, it's great that you're doing that and that's your standard, but that doesn't help me as a client. So a lot of times I don't need that luxury representation. I just need somebody who's going to fulfill my objectives, advance my goals, and do it for a price that I can afford.
So you would trade the luxury experience for an affordable one that accomplishes your goals.
Well, so first of all, I dispute that I'm getting a luxury experience anyway, right? Well, and here I think there's this idea among lawyers that, for instance, we have a beautiful lobby. See, we're a luxury experience. It's like, but I'm not coming to you for your lobby. Your great lobby doesn't do anything for me, right? We get the finest associates out of law school. Yeah, that's great. You have smart associates, but they're doing things that they don't have to be smart to do. And I get that you bought them. Bought them. That's a terrible way to put it. I get that you hired them because they're
Yes.
smart and they have potential. I get that. And I understand that you want them to develop into the kinds of lawyers that you want them to be. That's fabulous. That's great for you. But as a client, it doesn't help me. It doesn't matter to me that your associate one day will be able to write or be able to handle an incredibly complex antitrust case. That's great. That's great for you as a firm. It's not great for me as a client because right now that associate's just doing things like writing discovery objections. And so the fact that you're charging huge prices for them to do what really any competent young lawyer could do, that doesn't help me. And that's not a luxury for me. It's a luxury for you. The luxury firms are selling often is a luxury for themselves, not for their clients.
I like that. Okay. And it's very much sort of the difference between building a product that, you would like to build versus talking to your clients and asking what is the product they would like to buy and building it according to their wants and needs and specifications and kind of rolling with it. So if you were to design this law firm experience today, given where you think sort of the average company is and average legal operator or someone who reviews invoices and bills and part of the sort of strategy team, I get it. Lobby is not going to be on top of your list, as beautiful as it may be, and you will not care about the suit they wear and whether they even wear a suit. Maybe you won't even care about that. What would you care about? What is the top three things on your list? Whether they're luxuries or necessity, maybe that would be helpful to characterize as well. But what are sort of the three must-have, and what are the three nice-to-have?
Well, so the first must have for me, and this really is a big thing that I never would have thought of even before I started doing a lot of law firm management, but the must have, you have to have a good billing department. And it is shocking to me how many law firms have billing departments that are just incredibly inadequate. You must have a good billing department. The bill you're sending me, if you're sending me an hourly bill, I'd love to not have hourly bills, but if you're going to send me an hourly bill, you've got to have a department that can give me good bills. I shouldn't be spending a huge amount of my time reviewing your bills. You need to do a better job with that. That's number one. Number two is you need to have a process set up and an expectation that for every engagement we have, you make sure that there's an understanding about what I want as a client and what my objectives are. There are so many times when I have sent emails or had discussions with lawyers to ask them to do something, and I tell them I think exactly what I want, and they go, great, I get it. And then they will go off and do something for me. I'll get work product, or they will go away in the litigation, which is absolutely not what I wanted. And I'll be like, how did this happen? I don't understand. If you didn't understand what I wanted, you should have come to me and asked, why did you not do that? And the third thing that I really think law firms need to have is a process for clients to address their grievances or complaints or dissatisfactions. And that is very rare in law firms, in my experience. It's really hard to get a hold of anybody and actually talk about problems. And instead, it becomes either a fight about should you pay for this or not pay for this, which it can be important, but you don't want the whole relationship to be about that. Or it becomes a justification exercise where the person in charge of doing the thing that you don't like starts to tell you how you really should be okay with that and stop complaining about it because that's what we should have done. And it's like, you're not listening to me. You're not giving me the service I want. You're just justifying the things that you already do. So those are the must-haves.
Okay, let's take them one by one because I think they're in and of themselves of sort of massive categories that and opportunities for feedback. Let's talk about the billing practices, especially if you zeroed in on hourly. There's a massive debate whether that's still going to be with us going forward. Assuming that it will be with us at least in some form, because I hear sometimes it's just easier. I'm not convinced that it's always easier, and I'm not sure if that's true, but let's just take that for the sake of the conversation. And you continue getting some hourly bills. What is the one or two things that absolutely must be there for you to, as a client, to have an amazing non-luxury experience that is sort of table stakes?
Well, look, I mean, I would call it a lecture experience. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, you go to a fine restaurant, and they give you a bill that's wrong, that's going to be bad for your experience. And I've rarely had that happen. And when it does happen, they absolutely fall all over themselves to fix it, which is not my experience with law firms. But yeah, I mean, the issues I have with bills really are twofold. One is it is clear to me that the partners in charge of the billing are not reviewing bills before they go out, or are not really, if they are reviewing them, they're doing it in a very cursory way, which means that I, as the client, really are having to do a job that they should have done. And that's not fair to me. My time is just as valuable and useful as the billing partner's time. And so the idea that they are fine with offloading that to me as the person managing counsel, that's not fair and it's not good service. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really it's the timeliness of bills is amazing to me. I don't have a single vendor besides law firms that takes as long to send out a bill. I mean, law firms often, I have a 30 that you need it within 30 days after the end of the billing cycle. I frequently have law firms that send me the bill on the 29th day, which is amazing to me because all my other vendors, they send the bill like day 2 or 3. And for some reason, law firms just can't get it done that fast. And it
I mean,
needs to
there
be
is a
faster.
simple reason for it. The invoices that go out, right close to the service providing, are more likely to be paid sooner and actually to be paid, period.
So I kind of get that. So I do kind of get that. But so there are two parts to it. First of all, I agree that there are a lot of line items to review. And one of the solutions to that would be law firms need better technology to review their bills. And right now, a lot of them are still doing it in a manual process. And I've talked to some vendors about, hey, what's going on with developing better solutions for law firm billing? And what I've been told over and over again, there's no demand for it. Law firms don't want it. You can talk to them about it all day. They aren't interested in seeing it. So I understand that there's going to be more of a lag, but it shouldn't be as much, and it certainly can be cut down with better technology. But on the other side of that, what about expenses? It's amazing to me. I will see expenses that the invoice is dated like the first day of the billing cycle. So it'll be like the invoice is dated March 1st, and that invoice won't show up on my bill until the end of May. And I'm like, why was this invoice floating around for almost 3 full months before you managed to bill me for it? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know why it is, but I can tell you I see it a lot. And those expenses are important. They tend to be very high and expensive. And if it's not showed up on my bill in a timely manner, it's hard for me to figure out whether it's justified.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, as I said, there's a reason why all other vendors do invoicing close to proximity of service providing, is because the chances of that invoice being paid and understood and being
Yeah.
appreciated and more likely to be paid in full sooner If
Sure. Well,
it's higher. It's just higher.
think how frustrating it is when you're reviewing a bill and you're looking at something that happened 2 months ago, and you're like, was this reasonable? And you're like, what was happening 2 months ago? And you can't even remember. And that's not that's not an experience that I think clients should be having.
That's right. If you can't remember, why should you pay for it? It clearly was not memorable or impactful. I mean, I think that's the reason why people try to get I mean, I, as someone who own a number of businesses, have done that. You send invoice as soon as you possibly can because you really want the revenue stream sooner. It's really not that complicated. The second thing you identified is sort of the process of communicating my goals and being understood as a client and being sort of setting that high level strategy and direction. I'm sure you've sort of had a range of experiences, some are more successful than others. What are sort of the best practices when that was done well?
The best litigation experience I've ever had was actually with a friend of mine, a former partner of mine from the firm I was at, and he blew me away with the experience. And the reason is because I think he and I have been talking for forever. He and I talk about the place where I work and what it's like, and so he had a already sort of fairly good understanding of sort of the culture and the business practices of the company I work at. And so, but before we started the litigation, we had that conversation where he talked about, hey, what are your objectives in this litigation? Where do you want to go with this? Are you willing to absolutely go all the way to the wall in litigation on this? Is that what you want to do? Or do you want to do more of, let's get this to a place where we can settle it? Or are you looking for possibly resolving it at some point before trial, maybe without settlement? Do you think that's possible? And we had that conversation. It was maybe a 45-minute conversation. It was not extensive. But after that, I mean, I could see that he was handling the case to move toward the objectives. I thought we had a good chance at summary judgment, which I don't normally think. And he absolutely developed that case 100% with the understanding that I wanted us to try our best to get summary judgment. And let's move toward that and let's get it done. And we did get summary judgment. But at no point in that case was I thinking, what's he doing? Why are we doing this? What's this extra work? I understood why he was doing the things he was doing.
Yeah, I think in litigation, that conversation, do we want to be done before discovery, after discovery, summary judgment? Do we actually want to try? Do we want to be on the cutting edge of the law? Do we really want to find what it's like to talk to the cross section of the population or a judge? All of those things are important to discuss in litigation. I mean, so that you in-house lawyer can actually have productive conversations, with folks like your CEO and the board, because they will be asking questions and you will have to
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and think how great it is if the case gets resolved and you can say to whoever, in the C-suite or your CLO or your GC, you can say, yeah, remember when we talked about this case and how I said that this is what I wanted to happen? And look, that's what happened. Isn't that great? That really makes you look like a hero, as opposed to you get to a resolution and you're like, yeah, I think this is a pretty good outcome. Right? I mean, you want to look like the hero in your department who knows what's going on and is really driving things toward an objective. And you need your outside counsel to be a partner in that. And the only way for that to happen is for them to understand what your objectives are.
Yeah. So the last item we talked about is grievances. And, every product service has, there's always going to be somebody who is unhappy, and sometimes alarming rate, Sometimes you have everyone who is unhappy. It's important to kind of understand the temperature of your clients and address, and maybe if you can't address, change your client mix. There's many ways to solve this problem. If you're unwilling and able to make changes that seem to be causing grievances, maybe you should not be providing services or products, or change who buys them, or change the price, or whatever. Or maybe you should change the services and explain what's your product roadmap. And you voice this concern, which I think many of us from in-house department have had. You have a problem, and then it becomes really a discussion about billing.
Yeah.
And it may be that you were okay with the bill, or you were fine taking it on, but really what you want is a change forward. It's not always, I mean, sometimes it is a price, and a part of your job is to minimize it, but a big part of it is to have a relationship that you want. And maybe you find taking the price that it is, you just want to be assured that the future is bright.
Yeah, well, no, and I have a great example, and I'll try to be deliberately vague about this. But I had a situation with a law firm, and there was a timekeeper that I identified in one of the bills, actually over two bills, that I had no trust that this timekeeper was accurately recording time. Absolutely no trust. And I went and I contacted the billing partner about it, and we talked about it. And I said, I don't trust that he's being honest. I don't think these are honest entries, and here's why. And I explained it. And first of all, because I'm talking to the billing partner, right, who's also the guy who's running the litigation, I'm basically complaining to the person who is the root of the problem about the fact that they're the root of the problem. And it's really hard to get a good outcome in that situation. It's hard for any of us to be that self-critical and self-honest. But so I identified this timekeeper and said, I don't trust this guy. I don't want to see him on my bills anymore. He continued to show up in the bills for months after that and continued to do the exact same things that I complained about in the first place. And the reason is simple. It's that the partner made it very clear that he heard my concerns, but he also made it very clear that he didn't care about my concerns, and then the problems I had continued. And that really is just terrible client service. If I say, look, I don't want this person on my case, that person shouldn't be on my case. And I have a reason for that. And look, if you think if it's inappropriate, like if I'm saying I don't want this person on the case because of some discriminatory reason, sure, absolutely, I understand. You say, no, look, we don't do that. But when it's I have a problem with this person's work product, I think that I don't want to pay for it and I don't want to see it anymore, you should be willing to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to restaff the case. But when you're talking to the person who's responsible for creating the problem in the first place, it's really hard to get that person to take responsibility for fixing the problem. And that's why I want firms.
I have a similar story. And it's funny you say this story. I've identified a similar person who was not right for me for non-discriminatory reasons. Called the partner, said, look, take this person off. I was told that I'm not going to tell him how to run his business. I said, I appreciate that. You're not going to tell me how to run my business, so therefore we need to part. I actually made that decision because he was not working with me. To which he responded, I'll talk to your VCs and you will be overruled. And I said, that's great. You can talk to God himself. And unless somebody will step up to do my job, my decision stands.
Well, yeah, and I've had that happen too, where I have identified issues with outside counsel, and I've said, I'm not okay with this. And I've then had them go over my head to my GC and say, hey, Brent's saying this, do you agree? And the good news for me is that my GC in all those situations just said, I'm going to go with what Brent says because he's the person who works for me and I trust him. But to do that at all, I think is really offensive. And I let those lawyers know. I was like, I don't like that. I don't want to see you ever do that again. I'm the one managing this. And if you don't like the decisions I'm making, then let's you and I have a discussion about why you don't like what I'm saying. But for you to just immediately go to my boss and basically try to make me look bad, understand, I live here. This is my job. It's
like what? It's like, oh, sure, I'll talk to the guy who runs the company. I'm like, well, fine,
Yeah, but I mean, but it makes me angry because it's my job, right? I mean, this case will be over, and we may or may not engage you again, but I will still be here. And so, if you're going to go trash me to my boss, that's a really strong move and a very offensive move. And so, unless you're 100% sure you're going to win, you probably shouldn't do that.
I would say you shouldn't do it even if you have 100% certainty that you will win, because it is a small world. And I get folks reach out to me asking for recommendations and basically description of what happened to me in various circumstances and who served me and how I liked working with various people because they see us connected all the time. And I guarantee you, I won't even have to say much other than this person went over my head and I was the client and I was the liaison. And that was really an interesting experience. Independent of whether you win or lose, I think it's a really, as you said, it's extraordinarily offensive. And yes, I've been grateful for working with folks from CEOs to VCs to GCs who would say, I trust Olga to do her job, and if it means she's gonna fire you, she will. But it's always uncomfortable to be that in the middle and say, oh, will he or not or she support my decision? Am I in the right company? And it's being put in that position is something that is, I would say, completely not appreciated.
Oh, I agree. And that firm does hardly any work for us anymore. And and I've actually I've had questions like, why don't we get more work from you? And I'm like, yeah, I just don't think the experience has been what I want it to be. And we're just going to go with other firms now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. We've had this amazing conversation. I love that we went through the three different items that can make the experience with a law firm much more palatable for folks in house and how to make it work better. Maybe for the last 5 minutes of the conversation, I want to focus on us, in-house professionals, whether we formally lead legal operations or we are leading a department or part of the practice. What can we do? What is the sort of best practices for me as an in-house professional who sets the strategy, liaisons with my leadership, my CEO, my board, my GC, whoever, my stakeholders? What is the best one or two, three things you can do to be very clear that about what you want and you actually get it, whether or not you see it as a luxury good or actually just sort of table stakes services?
Well, thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed this conversation too. Yeah, the thing that I'm saying over and over to anybody who will listen, and I just had a conversation with an internal person in my department about this just a couple of days ago, is understand that you are the client and the law firm is the vendor, and you need to have the same expectations from them as you would have from any vendor in terms of their responsiveness and their accuracy and their willingness to give you what you want, and what you're paying for. And lawyers can be intimidating, and law firm lawyers especially can be intimidating, right? And sometimes I'm keenly aware that the person I'm having this disagreement with makes 10 times what I make, and I'm completely aware of that. I'm like, boy, this guy makes a lot of money. He probably has a couple of houses and some really nice cars, but you can't be intimidated by that. And you need to recognize that you have the right to expect them to do what you have hired them to do. And you have the right to expect them to give you the service that you want from them. And if you haven't communicated what you expect, then communicate it clearly. But if you have communicated what you expect and they're falling short, you should push back. You 100% should let them know this is not okay. I'm not all right with this bill. I'm not all right with you writing these memos. I'm not all right with you not getting things done in a timely manner. I'm not okay with the fact that I can't trust your bills. Those are all things that you should say to your lawyers, and you're expected. That's the whole point of managing outside counsel, is getting what you want. And I think law firms have gotten a really long leash on this, and it's time for us as in-house people in legal ops to start pulling the leash back and saying, no, you can't. I need you to be better. And if you're not going to be better, there's somebody else who will do it for me.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think part of it's interesting you mentioned this idea of being intimidated and essentially, the flip side of it being bullied. And in many contexts, when I lead a legal department, I get some version of that sometimes about the outside counsel. And I end up training either my entire department or parts of it about, hey, the higher the guy is, the more dramatic his fall will be. So don't underestimate how much leverage you have as a small guy and really actually embrace it and appreciate it. And take it as an opportunity to learn how powerful you can be, and you can teach this person a lesson and maybe change trajectory of their lives or not. But in the end, I think it will be very empowering for the two of you. And I do think that we underappreciate the importance of being a small guy who has a leverage of making a big guy fall. I think it's as the lawyers, we really need to appreciate this a little bit more because we are in business, independent of where we are, of understanding leverage quite well.
Yeah, the other thing I think when you think about is sometimes we get intimidated because we feel like we don't have enough business, right? And I've had lawyers in big law firms even say this to me: "Look, you don't give me as much business as Google does." And look, I'm sure that's true, but here's the thing: every big client anybody's ever had started out as a small client, and so even if you're one of their smaller clients or you're somewhere in the middle, you should have the right to expect them to still treat you well. And if they don't, you need to take your feet and go somewhere else, because if they don't value your business when you're a small client, you really shouldn't expect they're going to value it when you're a bigger client, and you need to find somebody who will.
Yeah, yeah. That conversation that you're too small to matter is also an interesting one. I I find it very interesting because, people say it with straight face and they will assume that you sort of will take it and will not have follow-up questions. I think my approach, and I'm curious about your approach in the circumstances, is to ask more questions and explain to me what it means and practically means and what impact it has and why. And I think if you ask, two or three questions and let them marinate in their own BS, so to speak. And you don't even have to say much. And then, just ask questions. I think it becomes very uncomfortable very quickly because, explaining to someone that you want to have a relationship with, that you're too small to matter, and really engage them in that narrative and articulation will make most humans highly uncomfortable. And they will end that conversation and will start focusing on things like, the weather. That's my experience.
Oh yeah, for sure, that's true. And I mean, the whole big client versus smaller client thing, it doesn't even make that much sense because the reality is it's not any cheaper to provide legal services to a client that pays you $2 billion a year than it is to provide legal services to a client who pays you $2 million a year or $200,000 a year. The cost is still the same. They're still paying the associates the same amount of money. They're still paying the partners the same amount of money. The idea that somehow, oh well, you don't pay us enough, so you need to pay more, you're not getting the same service. The reality is no, I pay my money, my dollar is worth the same as Google's dollar, and you need to treat my dollars with the same respect you treat their dollars.
That's called fungibility.
True.
I love this. We covered so much ground, and clearly both of us have no opinion about this whatsoever. I would just happy with anything, just give it to us. I love it. Great conversation, Brent. I'm so glad we had it. I'm so glad to kick off this episode with us, and we covered so much ground. I really appreciate it. If you want folks to remember or do one thing, if you want them to get one thing out of this conversation, out of a gazillion of things that we covered, what would it be?
Find your inner assertiveness and enjoy it, and don't feel guilty about it.
Oh, I love that. Find your inner assertiveness and enjoy it and don't feel guilty about it. I love that. Guilt is not a positive feeling. Guilt is an awful feeling, and definitely do not embrace it as part of your life. Brent, thank you so much for joining. This was amazing. Thank you, everyone, for being part of the conversation, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Notes to My Legal Self, Let's Law Better. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Just remember, the future of law is looking pretty awesome. Let's team up and shake things up in the legal world together. See you soon.